Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson, and welcome to our site management course. This is lecture 8B, and in this course we're going to be reviewing time and cost control. This site management course, it covers a lot of topics, and a lot of these topics unto themselves are individual courses. So hopefully today you'll get a good idea of how things work as far as time and cost control. Because we're really talking about being involved in the project. And so that means there would have been budgets, that means there would have been schedules, and then the aspect of, well, how were the budgets and the schedules developed? Were they developed well? And now, how are we doing on our projects compared to what we planned? Or do we have deviations known as variances between our costs and between our scheduled time? So we will discuss the reasons that we use that, the duration controls and the use of a project schedule. I honestly feel that the textbook could even have been more forceful on the importance of schedules. It's one of the most fundamentally important areas that big construction companies, small construction companies, tiny construction companies deal with. And the most successful businesses really manage their schedules well, because you manage your schedules well means you're managing your costs well. So it's another one of those integrated time, cost, quality things that we talked about in the last lecture, that we talked about in one of the first lectures. All of these things come together, and so it's fundamentally important for the success of the project. Ties really closely with the previous lecture on quality, because now we're talking about time and cost, right? The appropriate scope of schedule activities, understanding what you got to do. That ties to the beginning with SMART, specific. We got to know what we're supposed to be doing. Coming up with a realistic duration, not a fantasy. So a schedule shouldn't be fiction. A schedule should be non-fiction, and it's our best plan for what time this project is going to take with what we know now. And making sure that we use it as an effective communication tool. But that sounds kind of one way in some respects, so I would say an effective engagement tool would be a better term to use for it. So we want to use the schedule to solve some of the problems that come up during the construction process. We can do a lot of things in your future courses. You're going to have a project management planning and scheduling course. If you have me in third year, lately I've been doing the cost control course, which really integrates and builds on the cost, the budget, and the time, and monitoring the time, and trying to resolve things and get things back on track, and to have excellent documentation in the process. So we really want to make sure that we can identify where the issues are as soon as possible. In construction, it's much easier to fix things when we see them early on than it is when they drag out and they become even bigger problems, and rework then becomes a bigger problem. So, and we've already talked about too in this course, site logistics and productivity rates, and what that means, and what it means to your bottom line as a business with an income statement. We looked at that. So the relationship between productivity problems and the responsible party, and coming to a resolution, resolving the problem. So when we can think about duration and cost, they're not separate items. They work together. If you take a longer duration, your costs tend to go up. There's a per diem cost for every day you run your project. Don't forget that. And that per diem cost is like a clock running. So if your project takes a lot longer than you planned, then that's going to be problematic to your bottom line. Means and monitoring control effectiveness, construction scheduling, and computerized cost control accounting. Well, I can't imagine doing it any other way from that perspective. Owner's date for project completion. What's the driver? And we talked about that early on too, time, cost, quality. What is the biggest driver for the owner? Is it cost? Is it time? Is it quality? It's good to understand. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. That really establishes the parameters. It also tells us a lot with the decision-making process. You know, if the owner keeps making changes and the finish date is the main driver, then they have to be explained to the impact these changes are having on the schedule. How do you do that? You insert a change into the schedule and you see the impact it has on the schedule. So there's no denying it that way. Project plan considerations. So in the planning process, we have planning, we have scheduling, and we have monitoring and control, right? So I usually just say planning, scheduling, control, which includes monitoring. We have to know the activities. We have to break them down, do a work breakdown structure so that we understand the activities that are involved in the project. And a work breakdown structure is you take something large and you break it down into components. And then you break those components into further components. You get engagement with the people that are involved in the work because nobody knows everything, no one person. So it's a collaborative effort when it's done well. And what's the best sequencing and the interrelationship between the activities. That also ties to the master plan and the short-term schedules. And that's where we're getting that engagement with the subcontractors and key consultants and suppliers in the process so that we're squeezing out that efficiency and understanding so we ensure the sequencing and the durations for the activities are as correct as possible. Equipment requirements, correctly utilizing the subcontractors, as I said, and the field management and personnel. Last planner in lean construction, that's the foreman, that's the leads of the construction crews of the subcontractors. Those are the ones that typically know their areas of work the best, and that can help us with the coordination of on-site work. Our job is to ensure we facilitate that work in the most effective and efficient, cost-effective way possible. So project duration control, we want to look at delivery dates, and we sort of showed you in an earlier one where we can have a delivery schedule and we can tie that in with the short-term look ahead schedules, and then that all has to feed back up into the master schedule. All right, and we can also have some contingencies in place if we see some things on the horizon. There's the unknowns that may strike us, you know, like labor strikes or owner-based changes that we might have to deal with as well. So that means we can change our plans to a certain extent. There's certain things we can't change, right? If we're talking about constraints with our resources, there's certain technical constraints. Can't put on the roof membrane unless the roof substrate is on first. There's certain things have to go a certain way, but there's other things we have a little bit of flexibility with. So we need to have clarity on the activities. We need to assign the resources to the activities and figure out what's the combination and what productivity rate will they achieve. And that will help us define the duration for the work that's going to be done. All right? And then we need to compare the monitored with the, compare the planned, the baseline schedule with the actual durations. So there's different relationships. There's a finish to start relationship. Activity A has to finish before activity B starts. There's start to start. Two activities begin at the same time, or one activity starts and 5 days later with a lag, the next activity starts. And there's finish to finish. This activity has to finish for this activity to also finish. So there's different relationships that we can put in the schedules. Your textbook has an example that you can go through, and it kind of looks at activities and the sequencing of activities and cost for the activities. So you have the aspect of the costs, and you can put them in different sequences, and then you can test out the sequences and you can see, this one's taking 42 days and it's costing $30,840. Using this analogy, it's costing $28,940. What's the likelihood of success of this? If it's pretty high, then this is the best way to go. So you can actually do sensitivity analysis with that. All right. So the durations have to be relative to the work hours in the estimate, what did you estimate for, and how is that working with the duration and the crew sizes, because really it's hours of work times what that costs. Should relate to the quantity. Consider you might have to factor those durations based on time of year. If we're doing framing in January of a house, it's probably not going to be as productive with the weather. You're going to have interruptions because of weather more likely in January than you would say in June. So you have to consider weather, and consider if there's any long lead items, things that you need to, roof trusses, you need to order a long time ahead, a chiller unit in a commercial building, and also how that may be affected by subcontractor involvement. In the previous lecture, I talked about quality, and I also mentioned 20% of your subs take 80% of your time. Well, maybe you know this is a particular challenging subcontractor, and that could be impacted by that involvement. So really the project schedule, it allows you to go through the drawings, go through the estimate, list out the activities in detail, and build it. I think it's a very visual tool. When I'm looking at drawings and I'm developing a schedule, I actually see myself on site building the project. I imagine that. That's a mental model I build of the construction process. And that mental model should be something that then can be communicated to others as the plan. And it can be revised and it can be adjusted as you're developing that model, so you can get collaboration and other inputs. You shouldn't think of it, oh, I got to do a schedule. There's a lot of problems doing this schedule. I don't like doing schedules. You should think of it, I'm building this structure ahead of time, and I'm really going through the process, and that's helping me to visualize and see potential problems. In advanced scheduling, we may be even using a BIM model to animate the process, so that may help us even further to see potential problems, where maybe it's the level of complexity is too hard to fully capture, visualizing all these components. So you might work collaboratively with a BIM coordinator in developing the schedule, a senior site super, a project manager, a BIM coordinator that might be taking the architectural Revit model and building a schedule in Revit, in Navisworks Manage, to be able to collaborate and see the components, how they go together, and have those as talking points and discussion points, and seeking more information in detail where something seems overly complex. So the majority of the work is done with scheduling. Everybody's going to use a scheduling software. In your other courses, project management and planning scheduling, if I teach a course in that, I make people do a manual calculation of the critical path. So you understand the complexity in it. It's not that complex at all, really. It's adding and subtracting, but you also understand one little mistake and it throws everything off. It's like estimating. A lot of students always say to me, estimating's not fair. I make a mistake and now my project's $100,000 overpriced. Neither scheduling that fair. You make a mistake on that, now your project's 3 months longer than it should be, or 2 months earlier than it should be. So you have to be very dedicated to and pretty well detail oriented when you develop a schedule. And you have to be careful that you're not getting interrupted and distracted in the process. You have to have other eyes review the schedule, other inputs, and at that point then can you be successful with scheduling. You have to have the right experience level and drawing in the people with the right experience levels as well. So typical schedule sort of data looks something like that. So that's kind of that process. And that project cost control, well, we can bring in the costs. We can have separate cost accounting and control software, or we can even add costs to a schedule and manage a cost-loaded schedule to give us that feedback of how we're doing compared to what the plan was. So there's different tools and ways of doing that. And it has a baseline. So the baseline is the original plan and a breakdown of the costs that we can associate with various activities, and then we can individually monitor the activities. If we can't get granular with the costs, then we don't know where we're losing money exactly, and that's a problem, right? So you want to be able to have a system that you can get granular, not go crazy granular, but that you know this area of work, this is where we lost X amount of dollars. Not we lost $200,000 on this project. You'd want to know yeah, we did lose 200,000 on this project, but we lost 10,000 here, 20,000 there, 15,000 there, 40,000 there, 2,000, 1,000, 3,000 there. And then you'd be looking at Pareto's law. Why did we lose 40,000 there? Why did we lose 20,000 there? I'm probably not going to be going too crazy with the ones and the twos and the threes. I want to know. And then I'd also want to know, where did we exceed our expectations? Where were we under budget? And why were we under budget in those areas? And how can we repeat that success, right? So we want to be able to get granular with the detail. Just lost 200,000 on a project. I have an idea, probably. Again, I grew up in a family-run business. My dad, with a project, he would know where you lost money. We lost money on the structural steel. That's where we lost money. Yeah, so we probably did lose the biggest amount of money, but also we lost it here, 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 right? So you also want to know, be able to go granular and deep with it. Because maybe you're missing something that's an easy low-hanging fruit, using Pareto's law again, that you could identify that 20% of the effort that's going to return 80% of that loss. So major concerns: ensuring accounts are of proper scope that we can measure, relating crew assignment directly to cost control activity. This works where you self-perform the work. So subtrades, very important that they're very carefully monitoring their crew assignments. And if you're GC and you self-perform, making sure that you watch those areas. And this can be great feedback for having excellent historical data, both on the scheduling side and the cost side. We can compare actual and estimated costs. And that can give us feedback so that if we have more of this work coming up, how do we fix it in the future? If we're doing a multi-story building, how do we fix the next floor? Because we got another 30 like this. So we don't want this to happen 30 times. How do we stop it now? And have motivations. Be engaging with your employees. Make sure that they feel appreciated when they've done a job well done. They only hear when you're upset. That's not good management practices. People want to feel validated and respected for the work that they do. So you want to keep that in mind. Now, before I go here, I wanted to bring up a project schedule, because I think the book doesn't really give you, it gives actually the book does give you a couple of good ones there. I think it uses Primavera in its examples. So I've got just new town administrative building, and you can see my critical path is shown in red. This is shown in blue here because I've actually got something closed up, my pre-construction, so I should open that up. And then that opens up and follows out with the pre-construction aspect. So you see how it's broken down. You got pre-construction, you got construction. Then under construction, you've got site mobilization, substructure, slab on grade, superstructure, exterior finishes, building systems, interior finishes. And then under interior finishes, I have like flooring, building systems, landscaping. And then as a separate heading that lines up with my construction is closeout. So this is closeout, landscaping, building systems, flooring. Well, landscaping's out with interior finishes. It's all how they're indented, right? So I can roll that up and I can see exactly, this is the work breakdown structure that I'm talking about. Areas of work that you fill in the details, right? They have a lot of activities underneath them. And then under substructure, I can click substructure. That'll pull that up, right? And then I've got site mobilization. So I've got all these under construction. I've got closeout as a separate important item, and pre-construction. So you kind of see how the work breakdown structure works and rolls out, but it's also very helpful in detailing out the work at the beginning of a project to ensure you don't miss anything, right? So I know in these areas I've got to fill in all the things that are required for that particular project. I can also standardize and systemize these things based on project type. Every project pretty much is going to have site mobilization. It's going to have something below the ground. It may not have a slab on grade, depends on how that's structured. Superstructure, every building is going to have some sort of superstructure, whether it's structural steel, reinforced concrete, wood frame construction, cross-laminated timbers, something. Exterior finishes, so curtain wall systems, brick veneer, whatever that may be. Building systems, huge area, so that's going to have that. So all of these things, they're pretty standardized, but if there's something unique, I can always customize it, but it ensures that I don't miss an area of work. And so everything rolls up and I just have those headings there. I can view it, I can pull it out, and I can look at it in more detail. So if I want to see all the subcasts open up, I can just open them all up again. And I can see the critical path. Anything on the critical path, if it takes longer, my project takes longer. So my project's set to finish in 2022. If I make, and what's that, January 17th, if I make that 11 days, now it's the 18th, right? So it pushes out my project because it's in red. If it's something that's in blue and I add a day here, it's only going to change that particular day. It's not changing the finish day on my project. So that's the difference between the critical path and activities that have float. Critical path is the longest path through the project. If I've got something to do, I by right should have somebody assigned to do it, right? So if it's anything that's requiring work on the site, then I should have somebody assigned to doing it. And I can also assign costs to how that work is going to be paid out. It gets much more complicated than this, but I'm just trying to give you an overview of it. You're going to do a separate course on this particular subject. So as long as you're comprehending the overall concepts, that's good. So this is a bar chart, also known as a Gantt chart. The length of the bars are by dates. You know, we can zoom in and we can make this by the day, or we can zoom out and show more of the project happening. That's just changing the scale. It's not changing any of the durations. When we're done, we save this as a baseline, and then you know what? We can update this. We can update it, and if we update it, we can look at the variances. So we can put in when we actually started work and when we actually finished, and the program will tell us, oh, this took 5 days longer than you planned. This took 3 days longer than you planned. So we can check against the baseline. We can also do the same thing for costs. This was the planned cost, right? So if once I save this as a baseline, I haven't set it as a baseline, it would put all these costs over here. And then if my costs actually change, it would tell me there's a variance. Once I set the baseline, it would tell me that. That's your time and cost monitoring. That's what we want to be able to do. And if I see I've got a variance and a cost variance, then I can go in and I can look at how are we going to fix this. And there's a process I call the direct method of doing that. If you want more information on that, I'm not going to get into that in this course, but you can click subscribe and you'll see it under my YouTube website where I've got tools and techniques. So basically you look at schedule updating and recovery, you'll see it there. That's more you'll do in future semesters. But just to give you an introduction, this is fundamentally important to be able to know where you're at and to have thought through, developed an effective plan, assign costs to it, and then measuring against it. And doing that well and effectively, and soft skills, collaborating, engaging, communicating with the sub-trades, communicating with your field team, success is going to be yours. So really grasp these concepts, and in future studies really get into this. This is every bit as important as estimating is, because you could have a perfect estimate, but if you don't execute well on your job, everything falls apart. You could have a perfect quality assurance program, but if you're not checking on the testing and getting feedback to make sure that things are going the way that you thought they would, it's not going to be a good result. So you can see how these things interconnect, the different ideas, the different concepts throughout this course overall in project management. So that's what I wanted to get across here with this tool. You know, you can go into the resource sheet. We talked about cost, and if I wanted to, I could check what costs have I assigned to everybody. I could see what their baseline cost is, what their variance is. I could see how much cost we've incurred on the jobs to date, how much is left to be done once I'd saved this as a variance. So all of these elements are available in a good scheduling management program. So where are we at here? Get back here. So just to conclude, control of time and cost, very important from that schedule. perspective, the project plan, the schedule, cost control. Go through that chapter, understand the main concepts, and if you're getting that and you're getting these videos, then I think that'll be extremely helpful, and it'll set a good baseline for you going forward in future studies. So what I wanted to cover today, that's it. Tom Stephenson signing off, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day.